one, I had to figure out what I was actually here for. Like you're just talking about these things what you're just referring to. I had to ask the question and get the answer. Like, what am I actually doing? And what I realized is I'm meant to be serving by teaching using experience, not just reading a book and teaching the book, but literally going out there and sharing wisdom.
Damion, welcome to show day. What's going on?
Michael, it is good to be back. I got a feeling this is going to keep people on their toes. The only one that's going to fall asleep and nod off is Joe Biden if he's watching.
Oh man, mic drop on that one. I heard, and I remember this. You told me earlier that you grew up in Alaska, actually, and I don't really know the full story, but you're big on mindset, and you've gone through some stuff, and maybe we'll get to this in the show here about mindset and overcoming adversity and that kind of stuff. So, talk to us about how do those formative years kind of shape you and make you more of a resilient person that you are right now.
Yeah, I look back and I think the hearing no, like we're all used to, we've heard this as kids or parents or somebody's telling us no in the school system or somebody. But I remember as a kid when I was 10, 11 years old, I got told no all the time. Like, no, we can't afford this. No, there's no money. And it's the same message. Like, no, I guess I don't make enough money. And no, there's not enough resources, or I'm not smart enough. And I remember back then, my parents told me no, and it made me mad. And instead of saying, okay, I accept defeat, I said, I'm going to figure this out. And I wanted to buy some Nintendo games. I wanted to play video games. And they didn't want to pay for them. So I started a business buying Nintendo games by the batch, buy like 20 of them at a time so I could play them and then sell them. So it was a wholesale retail thing. And it was the beginning of saying, I don't have to take no. Really irritated my parents in my teenage years, a lot of therapy involved, but it was the start of saying, I don't really care if somebody tells me no. I'm just going to find a way to figure it out and fix it and do the thing I want to do. And I think that's relevant for everybody.
How'd you come up with the money to buy these things?
I probably did some other side hustle. I went out and like the modern day side hustle of driving an Uber where you make an extra few $100 and then that turns into a down payment for a rental house. And then you do your thing. I was out there 10, 11 years old selling Christmas wrapping paper or mowing lawns, or I was doing anything and everything. It was the hustle and grind. It's the opposite of the 4-hour work week. I was doing the 180-hour work week out of 168. Like I was just always out there trying to find the startup capital by creating it.
But you got your video games.
I got the video games, and then what's interesting is that led to a whole lot of video games and this whole big business around Nintendo games, and ultimately that allowed me from that time forward. I saved up money, and that's how I bought my first car. Was that?
What'd you buy?
A Ford Tempo, 1986. I had to dig it out of a snow pile in the middle of December in Alaska. It was like under 6 feet of snow, and I was proud of that. I see a lot of people that are given things or expecting things, whether it's from their parents or the government. And my parents are like, no, you can't have a car. No, a car is expensive. And I said, you watch me. I'm going to go do it. So I unburied that car and I drove it away. And then I crashed it a week later.
So interesting. So I can't figure out whether you had a good relationship with your parents or not. In other words, did they actually encourage and support you, or they kind of like try to kill you and you overcame it somehow?
Well, it's funny because I got dual messages, which is like what people deal with. They're dealing with, hey, you can do anything. And then, no, you can't do anything. Sit there, be quiet, shut up. And so it was kind of like that with my dad told me everything. He was scared of everything. And he tried real hard, but he was like, no, this is too much money. And then my mom's like, you can do anything. If you want to be a rock and roll star, you can do that. And I was like, Mom, have you heard me sing? Like, that's a disaster. That is not, probably like that one dude that was on American Idol that was terrible. And he ended up getting a contract and a record, but I was getting dual messages. So I didn't really take my mom too seriously, but something in me said, I don't really care if you tell me I can't do it. In fact, if you do, that's going to give me more energy to go prove you're wrong.
Interesting. That's interesting. So clearly you were very resourceful from an early age as well. And you also were very successful financially early on, but it didn't turn out so well. Talk about that.
It's funny because I did the grind. I remember I started off when I was up in Alaska and I was vacuuming the one of the BP building. I was doing that during the day, and at night I was vacuuming the building, and during the day I was knocking door to door selling Kirby vacuums. And so like there's always this grind. I sold 0 vacuums, but I did vacuum the hell out of that floor. And so that was one of those things where I thought this is probably not a long-term plan. And so ultimately I got kicked out of college. When I started a bookstore on campus that put the other bookstore out of business, they said, you have to leave because we want to keep our pencil machine out there that's selling all the pencils, papers, and overpriced books. And then when I started an insurance agency, And I got really bored with it because it wasn't a big enough deal. I read Donald Trump's book in the late 90s, or one of his books, Art of the Comeback and Art of the Deal. And I said, I'm going to be that guy. Now, this is pre-President Trump. So I ended up going into real estate, and I was buying houses using my credit card, which is a really great idea. That's a joke. Don't do that. That's a really bad idea. And then ultimately, that because I listened to guys like you when I was starting up, I was out there going to seminars, and I just did what the people told me. And I was like, I don't know what I don't know, so I'll just listen to them and follow what they said. And that led to making a ton of money, made millions of dollars, was very, I would say, pretty rich, but I wasn't really wealthy, because I was rich with money, but not wealthy with wisdom. And that led to 2007, thinking I was 10 feet tall and bulletproof, and had all my projects simultaneously fail in 2008. So I went from a $20 million portfolio to negative 5 million in 12 months, and ended up being homeless. And it was a reset, if you will. There's this great reset that's happening globally. I had a great reset in my own life in 2008.
How low did you have to go to come out of that?
I mean, it's, if you've ever done limbo, I was below the floor. So being negative 5 million, you're so far down. And what you have to, there's this like whole psychology of going through a mess. And in the beginning, the first thing you do is you deny it's real. Like, oh, no, it's fine. I was just borrowing more money until I ran out of resources, and then I pretended I hadn't lost everything, and everything just kind of going along. And there was a phase of that for probably a year, and then finally I said, you know what, I did this. And the big shift around that, and this is for a lot of people out there that have lost money or done something, made mistakes, which is part of this whole process of investing in business. It's really acknowledging that you are in charge and you're in control, and just owning it. The low point was when I was being the biggest victim, which is being the biggest douche nozzle ever. Like, oh, it's woe to me. And when I said, you know what, that was actually me. I made those choices. I got involved in this stuff, and owning that stuff. There's this incredible liberation and this freedom. I mean, you got it on your shirt, freedom. That the freedom is in owning your life. And once that happened, it took a couple of years of therapy. I mean, it was intense. It was very painful, but it was the work that had to be done. And once I'd gone through that, it gave me a platform of truth to be able to go out and ask a better question. Like, what am I doing? Is this just for money, or is it really for freedom? Is it just my freedom, or is it other people's freedom? And when I shifted to figuring out ways and focusing on other people's freedom first, then all of a sudden I got unbelievable side effects of freedom and money. So I had to shift from my own hedonistic tendencies to serving other people. And just like you do with all your students, it's really, that's the big shift that creates all of the freedom.
I wouldn't say I had hedonistic tendencies, but I had to come up to the to the same realization. I would say when I read Rich Dad Poor Dad in 2004, and I plowed all my money into restaurants, it was about freedom, but it was really more about money. Yeah. Frankly, it was like my financial retirement plan, and of course, that did not materialize. I ended up losing everything from that, and it didn't change until I was really at the low point. And I did shift from, oh, woe me, to what am I supposed to learn out of this? And one of the things was, hey, man, it's not about you. It kind of like you learn when you have a kid, you're like, oh, gosh, it's no longer about you. But I had to learn that about money and just about maybe being on earth. It's really not about you. So, hey, this is nice. Money is just really hollow. Why don't you figure out something a little greater that might actually help somebody? And that plan was to start blogging around all the shenanigans I did. And one of the things that, I did. I flipped houses, got into pizza, did it. And then the apartment buildings, that's the one thing that worked. And I was like, man, I'm supposed to blog about this thing. The problem was the business plan was awful. It was helping a lot of people, but it wasn't directly helping me. And then all of a sudden, it started to help me. But that, looking at my spreadsheet, there's no way that could have materialized in that helping me. And so how did you, for your own experience, there's a lot of lessons you could learn from that. A lot of people learned the lesson, real estate bad, right? They're like, people lost a house in foreclosure or short sale, something like that. Oh, real estate bad. Now, you could have learned that lesson, but why did you get back into it? What allowed you to come out, kind of shake it off, and then get back into it?
Well, when I got to the point where I realized that I had to figure out what I was actually here for. Like, you're just talking about these things what you're just referring to. I had to ask the question and get the answer. Like, what am I actually doing? And what I realized is I'm meant to be serving by teaching using experience, not just reading a book and teaching the book, but literally going out there and sharing wisdom, which is very different. A lot of people that teach in schools, they don't have any wisdom. They have a lot of educational facts and figures, and they just kind of push those out, but they don't really understand the deep emotional experience. So once I got that, the next step was to say, okay, I need to narrow my focus, just like you're talking about pizza and restaurants and real estate and flipping and all these things. What I see most people, including me, do is we chase all these things and we bounce off the surface. We don't make any headway because we're not going deep into anything. So back in 2012, I started shifting my focus, and it took me about 4 years to get really narrow. And the narrow was going into the space of giving people control of their retirement accounts with the EQRP. When I cut everything else out, then all of a sudden I started getting traction, and that started growing. Now, I think the universe and God tested me, because it took me a couple of years of doing that, where I ran out of money and I had to grind going into debt again. So I've lost everything 4 times. That was the 4th time where I was negative, and I said, I'm not quitting. There are people that are counting on me, and I really believe in that. And so I kept going with that. And we talk about the spreadsheets and these terrible ideas. A lot of times they're not terrible ideas. They just require lag. You got to give it enough time for the garden to grow. And so I had to give this thing enough time. It wasn't a get rich quick scheme like most businesses are not, whether it's pizza or real estate. And so that focus into that space allowed me to start connecting with a lot of really cool people and serving them. That's how we got connected, was, you setting up your EQRP and sharing this with the community, giving all these people a chance to not only have a tool, but these communities that you and I've created where people are working together and they get better together and they're getting freer together. And so it was really narrowing the thing. Like, it doesn't matter what you do. You can sell pencils, you can invest in multifamily, doing something, getting really great at it, becoming masterful at it. That's one of these keys that you just can't overlook and you can't skip.
Yeah, I call that shiny objectitis. I definitely had it as well, right? Especially early on, you read Rich Dad Poor Dad, and he uses confusing terms like real estate investing and cash flow businesses, and so I'm chasing like the shiny objects. And there's a problem, like you said, with focusing down and shiny objectitis, because with shiny objectitis, you're constantly shifting. You're not giving any success. Sometimes though, like I did with house flipping, which I did for 3 years, I didn't realize how insane it was until 3 years went by. And I should have caught myself months into it going, hey, wait a minute, what am I doing here? This is not passive income that I'm doing. Like I never took the time to think about it. I said, I'm going to do this thing. I'm going to flip houses. And I think there's danger in both of those things. I think you have to be intentional about something, but then you got to stick with it. Things always take longer than I think they should, And like today, it would have been a shame had you quit on your EQRP, which really is a much better version of the self-directed IRA, right? So, but you could have, and maybe even should have quit. I'm sure maybe you had advisors who said, man, stop putting money into this thing. It's a sinking ship. Get out.
Everyone said that, Michael. Every single person around me that was my team, my advisors, they all quit, and they said, you should quit. And so it's an interesting crossroads, because sometimes you should listen to people because you just don't know what you don't know. And sometimes you need to listen to your instincts. The problem when you're brand new is you don't have any instincts because you don't have any wisdom or experience. And so like after the last 25 years, I've started more than 70 companies. There's a lot of lessons there because I've screwed up unbelievable amounts of things, lost a lot of money and gone through this process. Like after EQRP got its own legs and has people running it, and there's this incredible energy around that, it's now in a mature state where it's got a 15-person team, and that's fantastic. What happens though is that I'm building this manufacturing company, Frame Tech, and it looks like this amazing thing that's gone from zero. It was a napkin 2 years ago, and our valuation a few weeks ago came in at $463 million. That looks like an overnight success story, but it's not. It took 25 freaking years to do it and 70 companies. And that's the part that people miss when they see these giant success stories. They don't realize how much time and energy. It always takes longer and it always costs more, just like you just said.
Hey, Damion, how can people connect with you?
Best place to reach me is really to see what I'm all about, is to go to frametech.com and visit and see. I mean, that's what you'll see me talking about on LinkedIn and Twitter and reach out and check it out. And truly, this is an invitation to everybody watching and listening. Come to Arizona. It's beautiful, by the way. Come out and see this. Like, we'd love to show you, walk you through and give you some inspiration for whatever you're doing. I just think it's really cool to be able to do that. So you want to connect with me? Check out the website and come to Arizona and see what we got. I'd love to give you a personal tour right here in the central Arizona, right outside of Sedona.
I'm sure a number of people are going to take you up on that, Damion. It's been awesome to jam with you as always, man.
It's good to see you. It was really great to catch up.